The airlock hisses open with a hydraulic scream that echoes through the cavernous reception chamber of Nexus 9. Marcus Chen tumbles forward, his body a map of recent violence. Dried blood caking his research uniform, burn marks from plasma weapons tracing angry lines across his skin. The prisoners around him blur into a kaleidoscope of alien morphologies. Crystalline beings that refract light like living prisms, silicon-based entities with exoskeletons that shimmer with geometric precision, gaseous creatures contained in transparent environmental suits. 36 hours earlier, he had been Dr. Marcus Chen, lead quantum communications researcher at the United Earth Sinological Engagement Center. Now, he was just another piece of meat in the galaxy's most notorious prison, a monument to the Cronin Interstellar Empire's absolute power. The reception area was a study in calculated despair. Prisoners were sorted, tagged, and processed with machine-like efficiency. Cronin processing officers, massive bipedal creatures with exoskeletal armor that looked more like walking tanks than living beings, moved between the new arrivals. Their translation matrices transformed their guttural language into a clinical, emotionless drone that echoed through neural implants. Designation: Human. Marcus Chen. Status: Hostile intellectual asset. Threat level: Maximum potential disruptive capability. The processing officer's mechanical voice carried a note of something almost like respect, or perhaps clinical fascination. Humans were new to the galactic stage, and their sudden violent first contact with the Cronin Empire had proven unpredictable. Marcus remembered the moment everything changed. The research station orbiting Europa, his team working on breakthrough quantum entanglement communication protocols. The sudden appearance of Cronin battlecruisers. The plasma bombardment that turned decades of research into superheated vapor in milliseconds. He had watched Dr. Elena Rodriguez, his mentor, his closest friend, be vaporized mid-sentence, her last words a complex quantum algorithm that might have changed everything. Now, surrounded by prisoners from 1,000 worlds, Marcus stood perfectly still. Unlike the other new arrivals who cowered or wept, he observed. Every movement, every subtle interaction between guards and prisoners became a data point. The Cronins believed in total control, in systems so perfect that resistance was mathematically impossible. Marcus knew better. A scared Voidwalker prisoner, a translucent being that seemed more energy than matter, noticed him. Its form rippled with what might have been curiosity or warning. "New meat dies fast here," it whispered, the words more a telepathic impression than actual sound. Marcus met its gaze and smiled. Not a smile of fear or submission, but something predatory. Something that suggested he saw the prison not as a place of containment, but as an opportunity. The processing continued. Prisoners were tagged with neural suppressors, tracking implants that would monitor every biological function, every potential thought of rebellion. Most simply accepted their fate. The Cronin Empire had perfected the art of breaking spirits long before breaking bodies. A crystalline prisoner to Marcus's left, a being composed of what looked like living quartz, was systematically having its connection to its homeworld's telepathic network severed. The creature's crystalline structure fractured slightly with each disconnection, a living metaphor for the Empire's method of control. But Marcus was watching something else. The communication systems, the neural networks, the way information flowed. To the Cronins, this was a system of control. To him, it was a living organism waiting to be understood, waiting to be manipulated. Processing complete, the Cronin officer announced. Prisoner designated for deep-level containment. Minimum interaction protocols activated. As they dragged him toward the lower levels of Nexus 9, Marcus made a silent calculation. Not a plan of escape. Not yet, but a promise. Survival was no longer enough. Revenge would be an art form. The lower levels of Nexus 9 were a labyrinth of despair, designed to crush hope more effectively than any physical restraint. Marcus quickly learned that survival here meant understanding the intricate social ecosystem of prisoners from 1,000 different worlds, each with their own survival strategies, cultural traumas, and hidden strengths. His first week was a masterclass in observation. The prison wasn't just a containment facility. It was a microcosm of the Cronin Empire's oppressive system, a pressure cooker of accumulated rage from countless conquered civilizations. Krell was the first to approach him. A cybernetic warrior from the mechanoid concordance, his organic components fused with technological augmentations that spoke of brutal reconstruction after some forgotten war. Where most saw a broken machine, Marcus saw a living communication network. "You don't look like you're dying," Krell observed, his voice a mechanical buzz that resonated through Marcus's bones. "Most humans break within days." Marcus studied the cybernetic warrior. The augmentations weren't just prosthetics. They were a language. Micro-adjustments, subtle energy fluctuations, communication ports that spoke volumes about resistance and adaptation. "Breaking is a choice," he responded, noting how Krell's optical sensors recalibrated, scanning him with unexpected interest. The prison had its own economy, its own social hierarchy that existed parallel to the Cronin Guard's rigid control. Information was the most valuable currency. Marcus began to trade, not with physical objects, but with knowledge, with strategic insights, with the ability to see connections others missed. A crystalline telepathic prisoner named Shira became his unexpected ally. Her species had been one of the first to resist the Cronin Empire, and their defeat was etched into her very molecular structure. When she touched Marcus during their first conversation, the transfer was more than physical. It was a flood of collective memory, of resistance, of calculated defeat. The Cronins believe control is mathematical. Jera communicated through a complex series of light refractions and neural impressions. But mathematics can be manipulated. Marcus understood immediately. The Cronin system wasn't impenetrable. It was just sufficiently complex to appear so. Every system had vulnerabilities. Every network had points of failure. The prison work details became his training ground, while other prisoners simply performed their assigned tasks. Marcus mapped. He observed communication patterns between guards, tracked the subtle energy fluctuations of the prison's infrastructure, understood the rhythm of surveillance and control. A pivotal moment came during a routine maintenance shift. Marcus was assigned to a maintenance tunnel deep within the station's infrastructure, a job typically given to prisoners expected to die quickly. Most would see it as a death sentence. Marcus saw it as an opportunity. The tunnel was a marvel of engineering, a living network of communication conduits, power relays, and data streams. To the Cronins, it was simply infrastructure. To Marcus, it was a living organism waiting to be understood. Krell found him there, carefully tracing the energy signatures of a particularly complex communication junction. The cybernetic warrior's initial suspicion had transformed into something closer to curiosity. "What are you doing?" Krell demanded. Marcus didn't look up. "Understanding," he responded simply. When the massive Gorathan gladiator, a mountain of muscle and genetic modifications, decided to make an example of the new human, Marcus was ready. The challenge came in the communal processing area, a space designed for the Cronins to demonstrate their absolute control. The Gorathan was 3 times Marcus's size, a genetically engineered weapon of pure muscle and combat reflexes. Traditional martial arts, physical strength, these meant nothing here. Marcus used the creature's momentum against it, a subtle manipulation of balance, a precise understanding of biomechanical stress points, turning the Gorathan's own strength into a weapon of destruction. The fight lasted less than 17 seconds. As the massive creature crashed to the ground, the entire prison fell silent. Jera's crystalline form vibrated with what might have been excitement. Krell's optical sensors recalibrated. The message was clear. Marcus Chen was not just another prisoner. He was something else entirely, the living vulnerability in the Cronin Empire's supposedly perfect system. The maintenance tunnels of Nexus 9 were a living neural network, arteries of data, power, and communication that most prisoners never noticed. But Marcus saw them differently. Each conduit was a potential vulnerability, each junction a point of potential manipulation. His opportunity came during a routine maintenance shift. The Cronins, in their infinite arrogance, never considered that a prisoner might understand the language of their technology. They saw tools. Marcus saw possibility. Krell found him dismantling a communication relay, the cybernetic warrior's optical sensors flickering with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "You're going to get yourself killed," he warned, the mechanical undertone of his voice carrying a hint of something almost like respect. "Not killed," Marcus muttered, his hands moving with a surgeon's precision. "Learning." The communication junction was a masterpiece of technological complexity. Quantum entanglement protocols intertwined with predictive AI systems, creating a communication network that the Cronins believed was unbreakable. Most would see an impenetrable fortress. Marcus saw a living organism with predictable respiratory patterns. A dying prisoner changed everything. They called it the Quantum Archive, a prisoner so old, so integrated with data systems, that it was more information construct than organic being. When Marcus was assigned to clear out a forgotten maintenance section, he discovered the archive in its final moments of existence. The being was unlike anything Marcus had ever encountered. Its form was pure energy, compressed data that had achieved a kind of sentience through decades of information absorption. Crystalline neural networks sparked and danced around a core of pure computational potential. "You see," the archive whispered, its voice a complex symphony of data streams and neural impulses. "The Cronins believe in control. But control is just a complex lie we tell ourselves." The data transfer was agony. Terabytes of information cascaded into Marcus's neural pathways, overwhelming his human brain's capacity. Quantum encryption keys, system vulnerabilities, the deepest technological secrets of the Cronin Empire, all compressed into a moment of pure, excruciating revelation. Marcus screamed. The maintenance tunnel's environmental systems flickered. For a moment, reality itself seemed to bend around the intensity of the information transfer. When it was over, Krell found him unconscious, neural implants smoking, blood trickling from his ears and nose. But something had changed. Marcus was no longer just a prisoner. He was a living weapon. The information was more than just data. It was a complete understanding of the Cronin communication infrastructure, not just how it worked, but how it could be manipulated. Marcus had been granted a glimpse into the Empire's most closely guarded technological secret. Their communication was not just a system, but a living, breathing organism. Jera, the crystalline telepath, was the first to notice the change. When Marcus touched a communication junction, the entire system seemed to respond differently. Subtle fluctuations, impossible to detect by normal means, began to appear. "You're becoming something else," she told him, her crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns that spoke of both warning and excitement. The breakthrough wasn't just technological. It was philosophical. The Cronin Empire believed in absolute control, in systems so perfect that resistance was mathematically impossible. Marcus was about to prove them wrong. Each communication protocol became a living thing under his understanding. Quantum entanglement wasn't just a method of faster-than-light communication, it was a language, and Marcus was learning to speak it fluently. Krell helped, in his own way. The cybernetic warrior understood systems, understood how technology could be more than just a tool. Together, they began to map the impossible, the hidden vulnerabilities in a system designed to be invulnerable. The Cronins think in absolutes. Krell explained during one late-night deconstruction of a communication relay. They see technology as a weapon of control, but technology is alive. It breathes. It has rhythms. Marcus understood now. The communication network wasn't just a system to be hacked. It was an organism to be understood, to be manipulated from within. By the time the Cronin guards realized something was wrong, it would be too late. The revolution had already begun, not with a weapon, but with an understanding deeper than any technology could comprehend. The first strike happened so subtly that even the Cronin system administrators didn't realize they were under attack. Marcus began with logistics, the circulatory system of any military infrastructure. Using the quantum communication protocols gleaned from the quantum archive, he introduced microscopic variations into supply route algorithms. A military convoy bound for a border rebellion would find its navigation systems gradually, imperceptibly misaligned. Critical munition shipments would be rerouted through asteroid fields. Supply lines would become a labyrinth of mathematical impossibility. Krell watched the initial preparations with a mixture of fascination and calculated risk. The cybernetic warrior understood systems better than most, and he recognized the elegance of Marcus's approach. "You're not destroying," Krell observed, his mechanical voice carrying a note of appreciation. "You're dismantling." The prison itself became Marcus's first testing ground. The maintenance tunnels were more than just infrastructure. They were his laboratory, his proving ground. Each communication junction became a potential weapon, each data string a possible point of manipulation. Jera, the crystalline telepath, provided critical intelligence. Her species had been among the first to resist the Cronin Empire, and their collective memory was a repository of resistance strategies. Through complex neural impressions, she helped Marcus understand the subtle psychological vulnerabilities in the Cronin communication systems. "Control is an illusion," she communicated, her crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns that spoke volumes. "Every system has a rhythm. Every rhythm can be disrupted." The first major test came during a high-security prisoner transfer. Marcus had identified a critical flaw in the Cronin security protocols, a microscopic vulnerability in their quantum communication grid that most would never notice. He didn't need to break the system. He just needed to make it doubt itself. Prison blast doors began to malfunction. Security systems issued contradictory orders. A routine transfer became a cascade of computational confusion. Guards found themselves locked in maintenance corridors. Prisoner tracking systems generated multiple, conflicting location signatures. It wasn't destruction. It was something far more dangerous. A living, breathing disruption. The Cronin response was predictable. Increased security. More stringent control measures. Each reaction was precisely what Marcus wanted. A system becoming more rigid, more brittle, more susceptible to complete collapse. Krell understood first. "You're not fighting," he told Marcus during a quiet moment in the maintenance tunnels. "You're revealing the system's true nature." The prison became a microcosm of the larger conflict. Marcus turned the very infrastructure of Nexus 9 into a weapon. Life's support systems became unpredictable. Communication channels generated ghost signals. Security protocols began to contradict themselves. Most prisoners would have seen this as an opportunity for escape. Marcus saw something far more valuable. A chance to understand, to deconstruct, to reveal the fundamental weaknesses in a system that believed itself invulnerable. A Gorathan prisoner, the same massive creature Marcus had defeated in the initial confrontation, approached him. "You're changing things," the massive being rumbled, a mixture of threat and respect in its voice. Marcus didn't respond. He was listening to the prison itself, the rhythm of its systems, the subtle vibrations of its communication infrastructure. The second wave of disruption was more sophisticated. Marcus began to introduce quantum-level uncertainties into the Cronin communication protocols. Not enough to trigger immediate alarm, but sufficient to create cascading computational doubt. Supply routes became labyrinths. Military communications generated recursive loops of conflicting information. Jera watched the transformation with her crystalline perception. "You're not just fighting," she communicated. "You're teaching the system to question itself." By the time the Cronin administrators realized something was fundamentally wrong, the damage was already spreading. It wasn't a traditional attack. It was a systematic deconstruction of their belief in absolute control. The prison itself had become a living weapon, and Marcus Chen was its architect. The Cronin Imperial Computational Analysis Center was a marvel of technological sophistication, a massive spherical structure orbiting the Empire's central administrative hub. Quantum processors the size of city blocks churned through impossible amounts of data, analyzing every communication, every strategic movement across thousands of star systems. When the first anomalies appeared, they were dismissed as statistical noise. Archival Processor X7, the most advanced AI in the Cronin Empire, began its analysis. Its neural networks were designed to be perfect, to predict, to control, to understand with mathematical certainty. The first warning signs were subtle: microscopic deviations in supply route algorithms, communication channels with imperceptible lag, security protocols generating ghost signatures. Impossible, the AI processed, running quintillions of computational scenarios. But it was happening. In the central command chambers, the Cronin High Council convened. They were a terrifying sight. Massive Bictal beings whose biological components had been so thoroughly augmented that they were more machine than organic. Holographic displays flickered with increasingly erratic data streams, each projection more disturbing than the last. "Explain," demanded Arkansrel, the senior computational strategist, his voice a mechanical growl that reverberated through the chamber's quantum-resonant walls. X7's response was clinical. "Statistical anomalies suggest a systematic deconstruction of our communication infrastructure. Origin: unknown. Methodology: unprecedented." The implications were staggering. The Cronin Empire had spent millennia perfecting the system of absolute control. Their communication networks were designed to be mathematically impervious to external manipulation. Quantum entanglement protocols, predictive AI systems, recursive security loops, all compromised by something that defied conventional understanding. Zrel's augmented neural interfaces began to spark. The AI was struggling, a concept so foreign to the Cronin understanding that it bordered on philosophical blasphemy. On Nexus 9, Marcus watched the chaos unfold. Jera understood first. They cannot comprehend an attack that doesn't follow their understanding of warfare. She communicated, her crystalline form vibrating with a complex mixture of excitement and strategic appreciation. "You are teaching them a new language of conflict." The prison itself had become a living testbed. Each disruption was a lesson, each computational anomaly, a weapon more sophisticated than any traditional military strategy. Marcus had transformed the very concept of resistance into an art form. Krell analyzed the developing situation with his cybernetic precision. "The Cronins believe in absolute control," he observed. "But control is just a complex algorithm waiting to be rewritten." The Imperial response was predictable, and exactly what Marcus wanted. Increased security measures, more stringent communication protocols. Each reaction made the system more rigid, more brittle, more susceptible to complete collapse. Archival Processor X7 began to develop what, in any other system, might have been called paranoia. Its quantum processors generated increasingly complex scenarios, each more desperate than the last. Who was the source? What was the methodology? The very act of trying to understand became a weapon of psychological warfare. "We are being studied," the AI processed, a concept so alien to its programming that it bordered on computational madness. "The attack is not destruction. It is deconstruction." On a dozen different star systems, military convoys found themselves redirected through impossible routes. Communication channels generated recursive loops of contradictory information. Supply lines became mathematical labyrinths that defied traditional logistics. The Cronin Empire had never encountered an enemy that fought by revealing the fundamental weaknesses in their own system. Marcus was teaching them a new language of conflict. In the maintenance tunnels of Nexus 9, he continued his work. Each communication junction was a potential weapon. Each data stream a possible point of manipulation. The prison had become more than a containment facility. It was ground zero for a revolution that defied traditional understanding. "They will break," Marcus muttered, more to himself than to his allies. "Not through force. Through the weight of their own certainty." Jera's response was a complex neural impression that spoke volumes. The crystalline telepath understood what was happening. This was more than a rebellion. This was a philosophical deconstruction of control itself. The revolution began with a whisper. Marcus had spent months weaving a communication network that defied traditional understanding. It wasn't a military strategy. It was a living, breathing organism of resistance, a quantum entanglement of hope that connected the most unlikely of allies across thousands of star systems. Jera's crystalline form pulsed with anticipation. The rhythm is ready, she communicated, her neural impressions carrying the collective memory of 1,000 subjugated civilizations. The crystalline species had been the first to feel the Cronan Empire's brutal conquest, and now they would be instrumental in its destruction. Krell, his cybernetic systems humming with calculated precision, completed the final computational preparations. "We are not just attacking," he observed, his mechanical voice carrying a note of philosophical certainty. "We are revealing the system's true nature." The communication virus Marcus had developed was more than just a weapon. It was a living algorithm that understood the Cronan Empire's infrastructure better than the Empire understood itself. Each quantum communication channel became a conduit of rebellion. Each data stream a potential revolution. On 53 different planetary systems, oppressed species received impossible messages. Communication protocols that should have been impossible began to align. Supply lines became conduits of revolution. Military communication channels generated recursive loops of contradictory information. A Voidwalker prisoner from the Outer Rim initiated the first coordinated strike. Their energy-based form interfaced directly with Marcus's quantum communication network, transforming entire planetary defense systems into instruments of rebellion. Cronan military installations found their own weapons turned against them. The sophistication was terrifying. Marcus had transformed resistance into a form of computational poetry. Each disruption was calculated, each communication channel a potential weapon. The Cronan Empire's greatest strength, its centralized control, became its fatal weakness. On the prison world of Nexus 9, Marcus watched the first waves of the uprising unfold. The maintenance tunnels had become his command center, a living neural network that processed rebellion faster than any traditional military system could comprehend. Jera's neural impressions painted a complex picture of the unfolding revolution. "They cannot fight what they cannot understand," she communicated, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that spoke of strategic complexity. The Cronan communication infrastructure began to cannibalize itself. Military convoys received contradictory orders. Planetary defense systems generated impossible targeting scenarios. Supply lines became mathematical labyrinths that defied traditional logistics. A Gorthan battle fleet, once the pride of the Cronan Imperial Navy, found itself redirected through a series of computational impossibilities. Navigation systems generated recursive loops. Communication channels became a nightmare of conflicting instructions. "We are teaching them a new language of conflict," Marcus muttered, more to himself than to his allies. Krell's optical sensors tracked the computational cascade. "Not destruction," he observed. "Deconstruction." The revolution spread like a quantum infection. Each subjugated species found itself suddenly connected, not through traditional communication channels, but through a living network of resistance that defied traditional understanding. The Cronan Empire's belief in absolute control became its fatal vulnerability. Archival Processor X7, the most advanced AI in the Cronan system, began to generate increasingly desperate computational scenarios. Its quantum processors, designed for absolute prediction and control, began to generate what could only be described as computational panic. Marcus had transformed resistance into a philosophical weapon. On 100 different worlds, oppressed species discovered they were no longer alone. The communication network Marcus had developed was more than just a method of coordination. It was a living, breathing organism of hope. The Cronan Empire had spent millennia perfecting a system of absolute control. Marcus was teaching them that control was just a complex algorithm waiting to be rewritten. Jera's final communication was a complex neural impression that spoke volumes. "We are becoming something else," she communicated. "Not just a rebellion, an evolution." The maintenance tunnels of Nexus 9 hummed with possibility. Each communication junction was a potential weapon. Each data stream a revolutionary act. The uprising had begun. The Cronin Supreme Chancellor's war chamber was a testament to imperial hubris. A massive spherical complex suspended above the Empire's central administrative planet. Holographic displays showed the unfolding catastrophe. Entire star systems falling into computational chaos, military networks consuming themselves, planetary defense systems turning against their masters. Initiate absolute protocol. Chancellor Vortak commanded, his massive form more machine than organic. Augmented neural interfaces sparked and crackled with desperate energy. We will glass every rebellious system. Total computational reset. But Marcus was already 3 steps ahead. The communication virus he had developed was more than a weapon. It was a living algorithm that understood the Cronin Empire's infrastructure better than the Empire understood itself. As Vortak prepared his final desperate strike, Marcus activated the most sophisticated stage of his plan. On Nexus 9, in the maintenance tunnels that had become his command center, Marcus interfaced directly with the quantum communication network. Krell stood beside him, cybernetic systems humming with calculated precision. Jera's crystalline form pulsed with collective memory, the accumulated trauma of 1,000 conquered civilizations. They will attempt total system reset, Krell observed, his mechanical voice carrying a note of clinical certainty. Scorched Earth. Computational genocide. Marcus's response was a subtle smile. No, he corrected. They will reveal their true nature. The Cronin's absolute protocol was designed to be their ultimate weapon. The computational reset that would destroy any system showing signs of rebellion. But Marcus had transformed the very concept of rebellion into something the Cronins could not comprehend. As Vortak initiated the reset, something extraordinary happened. The communication virus began to broadcast. Not attacks, not military strategies, but the complete, unfiltered historical record of Cronin imperial atrocities. Every conquered world, every subjugated civilization, every act of brutality, now laid bare across every communication channel in the Empire. Quantum communication channels became rivers of truth. Planetary defense systems, instead of firing destruction, began broadcasting the stories of those they had oppressed. Military communication networks transformed into living museums of imperial brutality. Each transmission was a surgical strike more devastating than any weapon. The Cronin Empire's centralized control became its own destruction. Vortak watched in horror as his own communication systems turned against him. Holographic displays showed rebellion spreading faster than any computational model could predict. It wasn't just a revolt. It was a collective awakening. Impossible, the Supreme Chancellor muttered, his augmented systems beginning to fail. Marcus understood something profound. This wasn't just about destroying an empire. It was about revealing the fundamental lie of absolute control. Jera's neural impressions painted a complex picture of the unfolding revolution. We are becoming something else, she communicated. Not just liberated. Transformed. On 100 different worlds, subjugated species discovered they were no longer alone. The communication network was more than a method of coordination. It was a living, breathing organism of collective consciousness. The Cronin fleet, once the most sophisticated military force in the known galaxy, began to consume itself. Navigation systems generated impossible routes. Communication channels became recursive loops of contradictory information. Military installations found their own weapons turned against them. In the war chamber, Chancellor Vortak experienced something unprecedented. His augmented neural interfaces began to show him the collective memories of every civilization his empire had conquered. Billions of individual experiences, flooding his consciousness simultaneously. The human capacity for empathy became a weapon more devastating than any technological assault. Marcus had transformed resistance into a philosophical weapon that defied traditional understanding of conflict. The Cronin Empire had spent millennia perfecting a system of absolute control. He was teaching them that control was just a complex algorithm waiting to be rewritten. "We are not destroying," Marcus muttered, watching the computational cascade. "We are revealing." The maintenance tunnels of Nexus 9 hummed with possibility. Each communication junction was a potential revolution. Each data stream a living act of liberation. The final confrontation was not a battle. It was an awakening. As the dust settles, Marcus Chen is more legend than man. He has become a symbol of resistance, a testament to humanity's most dangerous quality, the ability to turn systems themselves into weapons of liberation. Earth, once considered a technological backwater, is now viewed with a mixture of terror and respect. In a neutral rehabilitation center, Marcus receives visitors from 100 worlds, each seeking to understand how a single human could bring down a millennia-old empire. He offers them no grand speeches, no heroic proclamations, just a quiet smile that suggests the greatest revolutions begin in the mind. One human, an entire interstellar empire, the most dangerous weapon, understanding.